Hello everyone, Chris Sawyer here. Welcome back to the Varietal Show. Right now I am sitting here with a bottle of 1983 Eberle Cabernet Sauvignon with the man himself, the Sir Gary Eberle. Man, I'm here in your house. We're having a nice time together. This man is a legend, a California icon of wine. And this is an evening that we just decided to break open some old bottles in his house. Gary and I have been good friends for 20 plus years.
At least.
And we've judged all these competitions, but this man is a legend who came out of University of California, Davis back in the early 70s with Mary Edwards and Steve McCrosty and these other great people.
Yeah.
But something that most people may or may not know about the great Gary Eberle is that he also played for Penn State football, and one of his favorite people in the world was Joe Paterno, who is one of the greatest coaches in college football history. And here I am sitting with you drinking fine wines. I like this. This is a fun evening, just Gary and I at his house. Gary, this is a 1983 vintage. It says Paso Robles on it. Back then, this was not an appellation until this very year, 1983, is when Paso Robles became an official appellation. Guess who wrote most of that manuscript to make it an appellation? This man.
Yeah.
This
Well,
man. Here he
Me,
is.
Tom Martin, Vic Roberts.
Yep.
But I'll tell you, the very first wine to ever have a Paso Robles appellation on it was my 1980.
1980, okay.
Because
Now we're talking.
I didn't put the labels on the bottles until I knew we were going to get it. Now, I made this in '83, so it was 2.5 years later. But my 1980 Cabernet was the very first wine to ever have a Paso Robles appellation on it.
My God, that's so cool.
I would have served that to you, but I don't like you that much.
He does, actually. Actually, I tried to bug him to get some Syrah down here too. We were going to go back down to the cellar, but to be really honest, we have to do another show on that because there's too much to talk about with Syrah. This man actually brought that varietal into the forefront of California. You went to University of California, Davis. You had the great Dr. Harold Olmos, who... Tell us a little bit about just that one little track about how you got those cuttings of Syrah, of all things.
Well, I went to UC Davis. I left the doctoral program. I was a National Science Fellow.
Yep.
The only one in the state of Louisiana to come to California to learn how to make Cabernet. And since I entered a doctoral program, my major was enology with a minor in vit. So I had to have a viticulturist on my committee, and it just turned out it was Doc Olmo. And he was head of the viticulture department, so I was like, oh, wow, this is great. And I spent so much time with him.
Yeah.
And the grapes, the Syrah, because, in fact, the only reason that I got interested in Syrah was because of Brian Crozier, who was also a classmate.
Another classic winemaker.
Yeah.
California history.
Australia. He brought all these Shiraz from Australia
Yeah.
because those damn convicts couldn't spell. And
You didn't hear that here. Yes, you did.
Yeah. And anyway, I got a hold of Doc Olmo. I said, hey, what's going on? The Syrah. And he said, it's one of those crazy things. So many Harasti and all these guys, they brought almost everything to California, but somehow Syrah never got here in any shape.
Yeah.
And he had gotten some cuttings from Max Chapoutier in the late 40s, early 50s, I think. Mm-hmm. And they planted it on a block at the UC Davis. And then I-80 came through and took out right through the UC Davis.
So if you think about this, you drive, from Napa or Sonoma County to Sacramento, you go by the great University of California, Davis. You're basically driving as you look and wave at UC Davis, right over where the original cuttings that he took and brought down here to Paso Robles came from. Is you're driving right on top of that, and that's an interesting point for you guys to know. If you ever win a lot of money in a trivia contest because of that, this is the man that got you there.
Yeah, and there was this like 18 or 20 vines. There was about 100 vines, but the 18 of them or so were part of this
The
Chapoutier that had, and we used to, as graduate students, me and all the graduate students, Mary Edwards, Wade Wolf, we'd go out and we'd practice pruning, and Doc Olmo, and he took Dr. Having a senior moment, but anyway.
I remember you told me his name too.
Doc Alley.
Doc Alley.
And he took me out in his little Toyota pickup and he said, okay, these 18 vines are Syrah. This is where Doc Olmo got these cuttings from Mac Chapoutier. They're not in any of the programs, and prune them.
Yeah.
Take some cuttings. And
Take the cuttings. That's the most important thing you just said.
And I took them down to Doug Meter at December Pacific Nursery down in Greenfield in Monterey County, and he grew them out for me so that I could plant about 20 acres of Syrah.
And that was
True
way
Syrah, the first Syrah in the United States.
Way ahead of its time, you guys.
Yeah.
So we will go into that the next time. But we're talking about Cabernet right now because that's actually what we're tasting. So we got the 1989 here. We just tasted the 83, which was tasting beautiful. You and I opened that, and there's just a little bit of the regular cork left. The rest was kind of getting a little bit wet, and we opened it at the right time. A fantastic thing. I think that the whole point of this little talk tonight is to remind you guys that Paso is hot right now for a Cabernet, but this man helped put Cabernet on the map down here in Paso. And it's not just that you could come here to this great winery and maybe even see the great Gary Eberle, but the fact is how well these wines last over time. And I feel like we will go to the winery for a different show, but I think that really tasting these older wines really just makes me so happy and makes you so happy about the things that you've accomplished in your life. You know?
Yeah, next time you come up, we need to go back and get some of the wines, Cabernets from the 70s. But I pulled this 89 out because it's not so much true today as it was when I made this wine. But in 89, there were 3 major storms that came out of the Gulf of Alaska, and it rained in Napa, Sonoma in 89 3 times. But the storms never got south of Monterey. But everybody wrote 89 off because it was Napa, Sonoma, and Paso. I only make reserve wines when they're really spectacular. I made a reserve in 89, one of 5 reserves I made in the 80s, but you couldn't give it away. Today, we are able to say, hey, it's from Paso Robles, and I know there's a lot of thing with the fires and everything. We're still going to have some trouble with 2020 for all kinds of reasons, but it won't be because of smoke taint in Paso.
That's an important thing, you guys. So remember, this was kind of a panned vintage for up in the north, whereas it's tasting extremely well right now. I'm loving this wine. And when you really think about it, I mean, this is a 30-year-old wine, 31-year-old wine. And
it's young.
It's young. It's still tasting young. And I think that that's an important thing, too, about the 2020 vintage. And we could be down in your cellars right now is one thing, but we could be at the winery. And the fact is, it wasn't as influential here, the smoke, here at all. And so you need to look at Paso Robles as being something completely different than the other parts of Northern California, where we were very influenced. I mean, obviously, I'm from Sonoma County, and Napa Valley's right next to me, and it's not the greatest vintage we've ever had. But this one was panned, and it's tasting beautiful today.
It is. I mean, it was. In fact, it's actually probably better than our 2020 this year. But the 2020s from Paso Robles, you don't have to be concerned about smoke taint. It's just a good vintage. It's not going to be a great vintage. It's solid, not a problem. You don't have to worry about it. We only make reserves. We've never made more than 5 reserves in any decade, and never less than 4.
Yeah.
And 2020 will not. I mean, without the smoke, anything. It just was not that kind of a year that you really were looking into. But at the same time, we're only tasting.
I'm excited about
just
it.
from 2020. We get some great wines. I mean, some very good wines.
Yeah. Well, today I just finished judging the Central Coast wine competition, and once again, your Muscat Canelli wins #1, pretty much dessert wine for its category. It was fantastic. You make so many great wines. You've been doing this for a while too. When did you start the winery? Technically, the kind of tell them the story about the 2 labels.
Sure. Well, I mean, I came out of Davis in May of '73. Came to Paso Robles and planted and built the Estrella, which we 700 acres, and at that time it was a big winery. And I've made Muscat Canelli.
You use Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, Chenin.
My wife loved Robert Mondavi's Moscato d'Oro, which is Muscat Canelli, so I said, "Hey, I'm making Cabernet." And but I have made Muscat Canelli and Cabernet, the only 2 wines I have made every year since 1973.
Yeah.
And we have, I don't think there's any winery in the state that even comes close to winning the accolades for our Muscat Canelli that we have won over that time period. We've made it every year. It's a light, low alcohol, sweet wine. I tell people, the alcohol is so low and the sugar is so high, you can drink an entire bottle and drive yourself legally to the hospital for an insulin shot. But it is a delightful, easy wine, aperitif wine. And if you want to serve any Muscat Canelli with goat cheese, ooh.
Oh, I know. I think about cheese every time I taste that wine. I think the judges today were very, we were super excited. I mean, we all knew what it would be. If it said Muscat Canelli, we figured, oh, I wonder who made that. Duh. But I mean, this is the situation, you guys. This is Paso Robles. This is a legend. This is an icon of California wines. Last month was California Wine Month. Is September. Guess what? Every month is California Wine Month, especially here in Paso Robles. And I think that when you get to know these wines, the Eberle wines, and you really look back at the tradition that was started by this amazing man that's sitting next to me here, this handsome man, I must say. He always tells me how handsome he is, and
he
is cute. And he actually sometimes